Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for attending today's webinar on the 2024 IECC for garages and sunrooms. This webinar is recorded and the recording is posted to the Code Adoption Toolkit usually within the next couple of weeks. So give us a little time for that, and we will get that on the YouTube page. If there are any issues with audio, feel free to write me in the chat. My name is Erica DeLallo. I'm a senior PM for Noresco, and today's training is sponsored by the Colorado Energy Office with materials created by Mozingo Code Group. So Shauna and I have been working on trainings just like this one. She's currently presenting from Pueblo, about to do a training in Pueblo. And so we go all over the state to offer these trainings. And it comes in a variety of formats that we offer. Of course, there's this webinar series that has been much well loved by the community, but there's also the role-based trainings where it kind of takes a look at the energy code through the eyes of the code user. So if you're a plans examiner, an inspector, a designer, an engineer, contractor, you name it, we've got a training specific to your role and what to look for when complying with the energy code. We also do trainings on the model codes. I know that that's been a highly requested topic. So if you are interested in any of these training types, feel free to reach out to me and we'll get something scheduled. Okay, we also offer code adoption, technical assistance for code adoption. So if you need support when looking at adopting any of the 2021's IECC or iCode suite or the 2024 iQute code suite or those model codes, we're here to help. We can talk with your community, city councils, we can write up your code language, we can review for amendments. There's a lot of flexibility there. So if you're looking at adopting codes or the latest codes, we're here to help with that as well. Now, a lot of you are probably familiar with the Code Adoption Toolkit. It's got a whole bunch of resources and it's sorted by code user. So resources that are applicable to builders are in one specific location. Users that are more focused on building department resources, there's a whole other section for that as well. So definitely check that out. But my favorite resource is that Code Adoption Toolkit, where you can submit a question on any of the iCodes or the REACH codes, model codes, and a subject matter expert gets back to you within a couple days' time. We've got, so basically, like if you have a question and you're a plans examiner, how to review a plan set specific to certain code requirements, we can help with that. You can submit a ticket on that. Or if you're an engineer or a homeowner trying to learn about code applicability, we can also support that as well. So you can access this helpline through this QR code that I have on the screen, or it's also linked in the Code Adoption Toolkit as well. Okay, so we do want to encourage questions, so please use that Q&A function, and I will let Shauna know at the end of the presentation. There's also that ability to raise your hand and ask a question, and I can go ahead and unmute you. And I am going to launch a poll real quick, which helps us identify how you guys are finding out about these webinars. Take a minute to respond to that, and then at the end of this webinar, there will be a post-training survey that automatically pops up. If you could please take a minute to fill that out, that'll help us to improve on these webinars and then also identify future training topics too. And if you are looking for AIA specific credit, you can put in your AIA number in that post-training survey. Regardless, anyone that attends this webinar will receive a certificate with ICC and the AIA course numbers on it for self-reporting. Okay. Today's presenter is Shauna Mozingo, so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, Shauna, and let you take it from here.
All righty. Let's see. Make sure I get the right screen. Okay. Is it up there? I see the poll still, but other than that, I guess I could probably put that
Yeah,
in the
you can go ahead and minimize that, but yeah, I see the presentation.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we're going to talk today about garages and sunrooms, focusing on the 2024 IECC and the requirements for them. I just let you know that, as I was creating this presentation and going through it, there were a lot of different possibilities that could pop up about a garage or a sunroom. So in an hour or what we have here today, we're not going to be able to talk about every single situation that could ever pop up, but we're going to get through the hardcore requirements and identify when it really is a sunroom or a garage, which brings me to my first point is that don't forget that the energy code especially has a lot of its own definitions. And some of those definitions are different than what are in other codes. So I just want to make sure that when you're dealing with garages and sunrooms in the IECC, you're using the definitions for garages and sunrooms in the IECC. They might be different. I'll show you some examples of that, especially for sunrooms. But all right, let's go ahead and get started, hopefully. All right, so we're going to talk about the requirements at the different phases. So if you're building this sunroom or a garage at the time of new construction, or if you're adding it on later as an addition, or if you're altering it later to become a garage or a sunroom. So we'll look at all three cases. Now, the first thing that I like to do is remind you that we do not apply the codes where the codes do not apply. And so what do I mean by that? When we're talking about especially garages and sunrooms and everybody's different visions of them and ideas of them, we want to make sure that we stop here and look in the building thermal envelope requirements in 402 that tell us, yeah, our envelopes have to comply with the code, except. So there might be some times when if you design a garage or a sunroom, we'll look at the definitions to see this later, but if we design it to use not very much energy, then the thermal envelope requirements don't even apply, right? So if you use under 3.4 BTUs per square foot or a watt per square foot of floor area for the space conditioning of those, then you don't have to comply with the envelope because you're considered a low energy use space or a low energy building. Or if you don't condition it at all, then these requirements that we're getting ready to talk to you about right now, a lot of them don't apply to you because we're going to be talking about garages and sunrooms that you're planning to condition at some point for the most part. So just make sure that we're always applying the code only where the code applies. All right, so what is conditioned space? I think that is one of the things that sometimes that definition changes between the different codes. It used to be very different in mechanical code than it is in energy code, brought them into alignment. But it's not, I think people think that conditioned space means I'm heating it or cooling it. And so a lot of times they think I'm heating it or cooling it to 68 degrees, 3 feet off the floor, and that isn't true at all. That's that's habitable space in the IRC, and that's not conditioned space. Conditioned space in the energy code is, are we using any energy to heat it or cool it or above that low energy level, right? And so let's look at the definition. So it's an area, room, or space enclosed within the thermal envelope and is directly or indirectly heated or cooled. So we're going to talk about that. Spaces are indirectly heated or cooled where they communicate through openings within the conditioned space or where they are separated from conditioned space by uninsulated walls, floors, or ceilings, or where they contain uninsulated ducts, piping, or other sources of heating or cooling. And so that's a big definition. And so a lot more spaces become conditioned all of a sudden, right? So in this picture here, I have uninsulated ducts, which would mean this space that those ducts are in are conditioned. So my choices are, if I don't want that to be the case, I either need to change my identify my thermal envelope and add some insulation to it, or I need to insulate the ducts because they are truly going to stay in uninsulated space or in an unconditioned space. But if this space is unconditioned, then that means that floor needs insulated, right? So just some things to think about. Also, indirectly heating and cooling might mean I have a garage. I have assumed that my house is conditioned and that my garage is not. So here's my thermal envelope around that garage. If for some reason I end up not putting insulation in the wall or the floor ceiling assembly around that garage, then the garage is conditioned, even if I'm not putting heating or cooling in there. Right? Because I did not thermally isolate it from the rest of the building. I have not put insulation, right? It's conditioned by having uninsulated wall assemblies or floor ceiling assemblies between them. So just keep that in mind when we go through the requirements today, the definition of conditioned space. I always say you cannot enforce the energy code without looking at every single definition. All right, so let's start in chapter 4. I mean, chapter 4 right away has its own section in 4022. So keep that number in mind, 4022, for later on. 4022.13 tells us sunroom and heated garage have to comply with the requirements of this code, right? So I pull up the requirements. We're in the insulation, sunroom and heated garage insulation specifically. So I'm in here. It looks like, okay, if I'm in climate zone 5, I need to put R49 in that ceiling, and I need to have, R whatever in my walls, R20 or 13, depends on how I'm building it. These are the requirements, except sunrooms and heated garages. Now notice it's saying sunrooms and heated garages. Heated garages, if we're not heating the garage, as long as we thermally isolate it from the rest of the house, there are no requirements for that garage for the energy code thermal envelope. There might be for lights, or there might be for whatever else you're doing in there, but not for the energy code for the thermal envelope. So it's only talking about heated garages. Sunrooms and heated garages that have thermal isolation, so I've put that air barrier and that insulation in those walls, and that enclose conditioned space, so that's conditioned sunroom and a conditioned garage. The following have the following exceptions, right? So instead of R49 insulation, I can get away with, in our climate zones here in Colorado, R24 insulation. Well, climate zones 5 through 8. There is a climate zone 4 in Colorado. They could get away with an R19 in their ceiling in only the sunroom or the heated garage, as long as they meet all the requirements, right? So it's a considerable drop from R49 to R24 in the ceiling. The minimum wall is going to be R13 in all climate zones. And so that's a big break right here. So what they're just trying to tell you is, if you condition these spaces, this sunroom or this garage, if you condition it, but you thermally isolate it from the rest of the building, and we're going to see here in a few minutes where you put it on its own zone or its own thermostat, so that it's not being heated and cooled the same as the rest of the building, the rest of the home, then you have a considerable drop in the requirements for that thermal envelope for insulation, right? What in the world is thermal isolation? It is another definition in the code, so just make sure, like I said, physical and space conditioning separation from conditioned spaces. The conditioned space shall be controlled as a separate zone for heating and cooling. So this is why I say, like, a lot of people say, well, it just says I need to thermally isolate it. I need to have insulation in there. And if you're just looking at the definition of conditioned space, it's indirectly heated or cooled if I don't put insulation in the wall. But then you have to look at the requirement. The requirement says I have to be thermally isolated. When I go to thermal isolation definition, yes, it's talking about that insulation separation, but it is also talking about you have to be on a separate zone for heating and cooling. So you have to read all the definitions to get to the requirements. So if I want to heat or cool this garage or sunroom and get the break that I want in that thermal envelope, I have to thermally isolate it, put it on its own mechanical zone or system, right? and then I get the break. If I don't put it on its own zone, or I don't put the insulation here, then the requirements are the same as they are for the rest of the house. That's basically what we're talking about, right? So I just want to keep that because I think people don't read all the definitions, so they're only doing part of it. All right, so what about fenestration? That says sunrooms and heated garage, again in 402. Sunrooms and heated garage enclosing conditioned space have to meet the requirements of this code, which would look like we need a 0.28 window or a 0.30, right? And so there's an exception. Climate zones 2 through 8, sunrooms and heated garage with thermal isolation and enclosing conditioned space can have a 0.045. Can you imagine? So we're going to see here in a minute what the definition of a sunroom is. A lot of glass. That's like, it has to have at least 40% glass to be considered a sunroom. So 40% of your glass can be at a 0.45 instead of that 0.28. That's huge. So you really want to make sure it's on its own mechanical system. You really want to make sure that the thermal isolation is complete between the rest of the house, because they're getting a very large break on those windows. And the U factor of the skylights cannot exceed 0.7, which is still a pretty huge, jump. So just throwing that out there. What is a sunroom? This is another definition in the energy code that we need to look at, and it is different than it is in the IRC. So a sunroom it's only one story. It's attached to the dwelling, right? It is a glazing area in excess of 40%, so at least 40% of glass for gross area of the structure's exterior walls and roof. So I take this looks like a sunroom, right? I have one story. It's attached to the house. And do I have 40% of my area in glass? Now it's the 40% of the roof area plus the walls, the 3 walls that are attaching, right? As long as I have 40% glass, it's a sunroom. Otherwise, it's just another room onto the house that you're going to have to treat like you do the regular house, or if an addition or alteration if you're doing it later. So some of them are easy, can I say, do I have 40% glass here? I don't know what is the area of my room, but you get what we're trying to say. So that is the definition of a sunroom. So real quick, let's look at some of these and you tell me, or we'll decide. I don't know if it's a very easy way for you to tell me, but are these sunrooms or not that meet IECC's definition, 1 story, attached, 40% glass, right? The very first one is a great question. It is one story. It might not be the bottom level, but it is 1 story, and it does seem to have all the glass, and it is attached. So is there anybody here? I guess just maybe raise your hand or make a comment. Is there anybody here that would say this is not a sunroom? Be interesting to see. Erica's not letting me know anybody raised their hands, so I think everybody agrees.
Yeah.
Okay, so this it seems to meet the definition of a sunroom. Over here we have this. This is you can't see the whole thing. It's attached, but does it meet the definition of a sunroom? It's going to depend on how much glass is really in here and what that attachment looks like, because for this code, we have to also have that thermal isolation. What about this one? This is a no, because it's 2 stories, right? And so we have a 2 story, so that would not be a sunroom. That would have to be looked at. That glass would all have to meet the code requirements, unless you don't condition it. Oops. Clicking all kinds of things over here. All right, so this one is a sunroom. It seems to be attached. Not 100% sure if we're meeting 40% glass or not, but it looks like it. I can't see that other wall over there completely, but it looks like it, right? So, is this a sunroom for the energy code, or is this just an extra space? For the energy code, because you would have to have this space on its own conditioning, and there has to be thermal isolation in order to get that reduction. You could call it a sunroom. Don't get me wrong, you can call it a sunroom, you can call it whatever you want. But if you want the reduction in the code requirements, this room would have to be thermally isolated from the rest of the house, which it is not. It's wide open to the rest of the house. We'll see that the IRC will call this a sunroom, but it's not a sunroom that gets to take the reductions in the code requirements. This is not a sunroom. This is a two-story sunroom, so definitely I'm not going to be able to call it a sunroom for the energy code and take those reductions in requirements. This would be a great sunroom. It would definitely meet the 40% glass and everything, but it is not thermally isolated. Right, so can't take that reduction, which I guess is good, because with that much glass, it'd be a bummer to see it all go to 0.45. But same here, we're open from the kitchen into here. That's a beautiful, beautiful space, but it won't get to take the reductions. It's still a sunroom, I suppose, but it doesn't get to take the reductions. So you see where I'm going. This one is attached. It is closed off. If I had the other picture to show you, it does have a pretty good glass amount, and so we could call that a sunroom. So just trying to give you ideas of these things. This is the IRC definition of sunroom. IRC has a bunch of different definitions of a sunroom. So you have a category 1 that's thermally isolated with walls that are open or enclosed with screening. Well, that's not going to meet the intent of the IECC to get the reduction because it's not glass, right? You have category 2, thermally isolated sunroom with enclosed walls. The openings are enclosed with translucent or transparent plastic or glass, but the space is non-habitable and unconditioned, okay? To take that reduction for the, well, especially if it's non-habitable, if it's unconditioned, it doesn't have requirements for the thermal envelope in the energy code at all. So we wouldn't even worry about that one, right? Any of these that say unconditioned are not going to have a requirement for their thermal envelope anyway, other than to be thermally isolated from the rest of the house, right? Our thermal envelope would be at the main house. So what I think we're looking at in this energy code category 4, thermally isolated sunroom with enclosed walls. The sunroom is designed to be heated or cooled by a separate temperature control, right? There's one of the requirements. Thermally isolated. Yep, that sounds like our sunrooms. The fenestration complies with the additional requirements for water sealing and air sealing and thermal performance, and the space is conditioned. It says it's non-habitable. Yeah, that's one of those terms. But it is conditioned. That meets the sunroom requirements. And so it's non-habitable. You have to look at that definition of habitable, but anyway, we're worried about the rest of it. The rest of it meets the requirements. So pretty much the energy code sunrooms would meet a category 4 IERC definition. So, all right. Garages attached. So what about a garage? There's a lot of kind of garages out there, right? We have attached garages. That's pretty easy to see whether or not they're attached or detached. We're only talking about, to meet this lower requirement for garages, they have to be conditioned, heated, right? They have to be conditioned. They have to, they have to be heated. This is so weird because you see that one code section. One of the code sections says conditioned, and one of the code sections says heated garages. Doesn't say anything about cooled garages. It says heated garages. So you have to pay attention to that. A conditioned garage would have to meet all the requirements of the code. But if it's just a heated garage and it's thermally isolated and it's on its own space conditioning, then it might get these lesser requirements. So there's just some weird little yeah, some weird things. Yes, I'm not going to say that word. All right, so attached garages. This is a detached garage, right? I have a detached garage. sometimes it's easy to tell whether it's detached or attached garage. But sometimes what you need to really know is it thermally isolated, right? I have a garage here, it's thermally isolated from the rest of the house. I have a garage here, it's thermally isolated, and probably it could very well even be conditioned because it's got all its drywall, and so this could be a conditioned garage that could have gotten the break from some of the requirements, maybe. Yeah. And then this one, this is something I put this in here for a very specific reason. Because a lot of raters say this was built on the plans as a garage. You might have converted it to a bedroom, but it was built as a garage. And so they always are trying to tell me they don't have to rate these spaces. They don't have to blower door and duct test these spaces because it's a garage and the code allows you to get out of that requirement. And I just want to remind you that this space is no longer a garage. There has been a change of use, a change, that has taken place. It is no longer a garage. You cannot go to resident standards, and I've had to reach out to resident, and they're like, yeah, there's a loophole in there we need to fix. That says, you can't go to resident center and say, this is a garage, I don't have to test it. It's no longer a garage. And so, just something that we're dealing with, for garages at a different level. All right. But for garages, right? So this is what the requirement I'm telling you about. Garages don't, for heated, doesn't say conditioned, for heated attached private garages and heated detached private garages, it's accessory to 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhouses, not more than 3 stories above grade plane. So everything complying with this residential code. The building thermal envelope tightness and insulation installation shall be considered acceptable where the items in the table, that air leakage, that air sealing and insulation table, if you meet those, you do not have to test, right? So it does say that the code official might require a approved third party that shows that you met all of those requirements. But heated attached private garages, heated attached private garage space and heated detached private garage space shall be thermally isolated from any habitable conditioned spaces. So there's a lot of terms in that one paragraph that are defined. So if I just have a heated garage, as long as I thermally isolate it, I do not have to do a blower door test. I could just do the verifying of all of those other requirements. But if I have, maybe in this last sentence is speaking to that other part, like a heated attached private garage space or a detached private garage space has to be thermally isolated from any other habitable or conditioned space that you might have converted that garage into, right? So it's only the heated garage space that does not have to be tested. But the conditioned habitable space that you converted part of the garage into does have to be tested. And so a lot of people are saying, nope, that's a garage. I don't have to do anything in there. And that's not true. And so you just really have to sit and take some time in some of these paragraphs because they lump a bunch of stuff in there. All right, what other code requirements kick in? Let's look at some of these other code requirements. Do you think, does mechanical ventilation kick into an attached garage or sunroom? The code says buildings and dwelling units complying with the air leakage requirements shall be provided with mechanical ventilation that complies with the requirements of 1505 of the IRC. Well, we don't have to do air leakage. I mean, we do have to do the air barrier table, but we don't have to do the air leakage testing. So if I do this and I thermally isolate that garage or that sunroom from the rest of the house, do you think that the garage, or just because they're heating that garage or they're heating or cooling that sunroom, does it need mechanical ventilation? Not 100% clear because it's saying if it meets 402511, which is, you know, not the air leakage testing part, that it would have to meet the ventilation, but it probably needs some ventilation. I don't know if it has to be mechanical. I don't know. I would love to hear your comments on that. I've kicked it around back and forth. Yes, I can require it. No, I can't. I've kicked it around a few times. But so I look for some comments on that. Heating outside the building. Some people try to tell me that because this like especially for a garage or even a sunroom, because I've put it on the other, I've thermally isolated it so it's on the other side of the thermal envelope, that I just have to apply the heating and cooling requirements of heat outside the building, and that is not true, because if you take that space and you apply heat to it, then it's no longer necessarily outside the building thermal envelope. It has a thermal envelope, but it's just a little lesser of a requirement. So it's still inside the thermal envelope. The only time you would apply that heating outside the building is if you weren't, I don't know, that's going to get tricky. Like if you really weren't heating or cooling that garage and it was going to be an unconditioned space, but then you decided to put some little, I don't know. No, I think that code section is not going to apply at all. I've had people try to argue with me about heating their garage with a radiant system and calling it outside the building thermal envelope. And I'm like, nope, it's calling it outside the building, not outside the building thermal envelope. All right, interior lighting controls. Habitable spaces get dimmers or auto shutoffs within 20 minutes. And we just saw that a lot of those are not habitable. But garages, unfinished basement, laundry rooms, and utility rooms have auto shutoff. So the garage would get some auto shutoff. I don't know about, is that sunroom habitable or not? That's something that your jurisdiction is going to have to do. That all of those definitions of sunrooms in the IRC say that they're non-habitable. Additional efficiency requirements, do they have to comply? Does a garage or a sunroom have to comply with the additional efficiency package requirements? The R408, go in there and get those points. It says residential buildings shall earn not less than 10 credits from the two measures. And so if I built this house, let's say it's a sunroom, and I built it all together as new construction, then and it's part of the house, or even if it's an attached garage, I suppose, and it's heated, and it's all part of the original building, the whole house combined, the whole permitted house combined, would have to get 10 points from R408. If I go into chapter 5, we're going to see here in a minute when we get into additions and alterations. There are additions and alterations do now have to get credits. They don't have to get as much, right? So no matter what, they're probably going to end up somehow either in with the rest of the house, or if you do it by themselves, there's gonna be some credits that are gonna have to be gotten there. All right, let's get into additions real quick. So if I built a sunroom as an addition later after the fact, well, first of all, it would have to meet the definition of a sunroom, right? It would have to be 40% glass, 1 story, and separate conditioning system. If it doesn't meet that 40% glass and it's not thermally isolated, then it's just an addition. If I want the break in the R value and the U factor, then it has to meet the definition of a sunroom or a heated garage, right? So has to comply with the insulation requirements of 4021. So I'm in chapter 5, but it's sending me to chapter 4 to meet the insulation requirements for an addition, because this is new construction, so it's going to have to meet the construction of new homes. But when I get or this is in 402.1, sorry, that allows me to get out of, I can see if I can get those low energy uses or call it unconditioned use. And if so, then don't even have to worry about the rest of this. Otherwise, I go to 402.2. Remember, I said, remember that section to get the specific insulation requirements. 4022.13 is where those, I can get that break for the insulation requirements. And 402.4 is where I can get the break for the U factor requirements. So I still have to go there. I can still take the breaks as long as my addition of a sunroom meets these requirements. There is a thing in there about air leakage. So if I built that sunroom and it is, conditioned sunroom, there's an exception for garages. Garages don't have to get air leakage testing, right? But if I built it on as as part of my brand new house, I would have to get that air leakage testing. Because I couldn't find anything that would allow me to get out of it. Somebody might find something in there that allows that sunroom to not have to be tested if it's built with the house. But if I build it as an addition, there is an exception. It does send you to 402.5 for air leakage so that you build a tight building and you get your air barrier and everything. But there is an exception out of testing for additions. So if I build it with the rest, there's some interesting things here, like what is better, to build it as an addition so I don't have to test it? But then if you do as an addition, you're gonna have to add points just for the sunroom, just for the addition from that additional efficiency package. But if I built it as the whole house, yes, I would have to test it with the rest of the house, but the points I could spread out for the whole house, right? So there's anybody's guess on how we should really do these. New installed ductwork has to comply with all of 403. Existing ductwork has to comply with 403 and the fact that it has to be air sealed. I mean, we have to seal the ducts and all of that and size them correctly, but they're not required to do the duct testing. So that is for additions. Only new water heating systems and new lighting systems have to comply. And I want to point out here, new lighting systems that are part of the addition have to comply with 404.1. That's the only thing it sends you to, which is the high efficacy lighting. It does not say you have to do the controls. It only sends you to 404.1. So, all right. Also in additions, this is where that this new, because it's all in blue, you can see that means it's new to the 2024 additional energy efficiency. Additions have to get at least 5 credits from the R408 additional efficiency package tables. There are some exceptions on there. Maybe something might meet one of those exceptions. Otherwise, it would have to get 5 credits. If we're altering a space to become a sunroom or to become a garage, then, that gets trickier. It's very rare we're going to alter a space to become a garage unless we had a garage and we converted it to a living space, and now we're going to convert it back to a heated garage. That might comply here. If I have a sunroom, or I have a space and I want to convert it to a sunroom, I'm going to probably have to add a lot of glass to make it a sunroom because I got to get it to 40% to be considered a sunroom. So it's very rare that this will ever take place, but if it does, I could alter it. There are I have to meet the code requirements for altering my space. My fenestration has to meet the code requirements for any new glass, and I'm probably going to have some new glass, especially if it's a sunroom. It would have to meet the code requirements. And then roof and ceiling and attic alterations. There are some new requirements in the 2024 about altering your ceiling insulation or your wall insulation, and it does give you some breaks somewhere where it might be, what does it say? Limiting conditions might prevent compliance. So you're gonna have to really pay attention if somebody's altering something to become a sunroom or a garage. I really don't think these will kick in too much. Same with above grade wall alterations. You got to comply with the code, but then at the same time, and it sends you to the IRC for your vapor retarder requirements and everything. But it does give you those same, kind of caveats about if it's too hard to do. And so same with floor has to meet the air barrier. Do say when you're altering a building that, whatever you touch, you need to bring the air barrier up, but it doesn't have to be continuous with the rest, or you'd have to tear the whole building apart, right? New heating and cooling systems have to comply. And then new ductwork. Only the new ductwork installed as part of the alteration would have to comply. System sizing, you have to size the system to make sure it can handle the load of whatever it is you're doing to this new space. So there are some requirements in there, like I say, and there's a little break on the duct leakage testing and how much of it you have to test on alterations. So pay attention to it if you get something that you're converting, but I have a hard time seeing somebody converting into a garage and somebody converting into a sunroom that would truly meet the definition of energy code sunroom. But could happen. So surface water heating and lighting, it's just going after any new systems put in there have to comply, right? And you get a 10% break on the lighting. But if they do an alteration, they have to get at least 3 credits from that R408, the additional efficiency package. And then if they change the occupancy, this happens sometimes, you have to pay attention to this. Any space that's converted to a dwelling unit or a portion from another use or occupancy. So if I convert to a garage, this is not where I'm going to be. That's going to be in that alteration section or something, because this is talking about any spaces that is converted to a dwelling unit or a portion of a dwelling unit. So maybe something converted to the sunroom, but not converting to a garage, because it's talking not about that, right? There are requirements that kick in that you have to comply with the code for it. Any unconditioned or low energy space that is altered to become conditioned, then they would have to comply with the section on additions. So this could kick in probably more than this change of occupancy or use. Is probably more likely that they're going to take an unconditioned or low energy space and make it conditioned. Then they take that garage and now they're going to heat it. They're going to comply with R502, right? They're going to take that whatever they had, a screened in porch, and now they're going to make it into a sunroom. They're going to have to comply as an addition with the code, right? So, all right, that's all that I have. I always just like to put out, you please go to that toolkit. There's so much information in there. We went over it. Erica went over it in the beginning, but it's an amazing toolkit. We're adding to it all the time. We want to make sure that it stays there, so please use it. But if we have any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer them now.
Thanks, Shauna. Okay, yeah, like I said in the beginning of this, if you have a question, you want to ask it directly, feel free to raise your hand, or you can go ahead and use that Q&A function and we will get your question answered. But I do see one that came up.
Okay.
And it is there a formal definition of a low energy space?
Yes, well, I don't know how formal it is. In that section that I showed in the very beginning, that section of the code, sorry for flying through here, 4021, so it tells you a building complies with the requirements of the code for the envelope. It's in the building thermal envelope section, which is 402, right? In both commercial and residential. And it says the following low energy buildings. So it's telling you that this is what makes it low energy. A low energy building is one that uses less than 3.4 BTUs per square foot or 1 watt per square foot for space conditioning, or doesn't condition it at all. But remember, you got to get that definition of conditioned space, because you might be conditioning it. You think, oh, if I don't heat it or cool it, I'm a low energy use building and I don't have to comply with the envelope requirements. That if you don't thermally isolate it and you could be heating it or cooling it by not separating it from the rest of the house. So that is your definition, because it says the following low energy buildings.
Okay, thanks, Shauna. I don't see any other questions.
Okay.
So Shauna and I will stay on the line for another couple minutes and see if anything pops up. And otherwise, we will see you in a few weeks. Our next session is at the beginning of June, first Wednesday of June. So we can hope to see you there.